This 4-year-old orphan gets beaten up trying to defend a stray dog, but a millionaire sees it, and what she does is heartwarming. Please comment and give my story a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The scene unfolded on a frigid winter afternoon, as the sky hung grey and heavy over the sprawling industrial metropolis of Chicago. The 4-year-old boy was huddled on the ground, trying to shield a mutt, whining in pain with his frail body. 3 teenagers surrounded him, laughing as they kicked both the child and the injured animal. The little boy didn't cry, he just kept his arms around the dog, taking each blow without letting go of the bloodied creature. A 30-year-old woman had stopped her luxury car at a red light when she noticed the commotion on the side street. She got out of the vehicle without a second thought, her high heels clicking loudly on the pavement as she strode purposefully toward the aggressors. Her impeccable appearance and the firmness in her voice were enough to scare off the teenagers, who ran away, hurling insults. She knelt beside the boy and saw that he was trembling violently, wearing only a torn t-shirt and dirty shorts despite the intense cold. The dog was hurt, with wounds on its paws and snout. The boy finally looked at her with wide eyes, not of fear, but of silent pleading. The woman picked them both up, the boy and the animal, and placed them in the back seat of the car. Throughout the drive to her mansion in the city's most affluent neighborhood, the little boy remained quiet, stroking the dog's dirty fur with touching devotion. She had lived alone in that enormous house since her father passed away 2 years earlier, leaving behind a hotel empire and a considerable fortune in investments that she managed with inherited skill. Loneliness had never bothered her before, but something about that skinny, bruised boy awakened a strange feeling in her, a desire to protect that she had never experienced. Upon arriving, she prepared a hot bath and set out clean clothes. However, the boy refused to eat anything before the dog was taken to the vet. He repeated softly, almost in a whisper, that the animal needed help first. The determination in the voice of that small, fragile child surprised her. She called an emergency veterinarian and paid generously to have him come to the mansion immediately. While the professional cared for the animal, the boy watched every movement with intense attention. Only after the dog had received medication, had its wounds treated, and had fallen asleep on an improvised bed of soft blankets, did the little one agree to drink a glass of warm milk and eat a few cookies. His hands trembled as he held the glass, as if afraid someone would take it away at any moment. In the following days, the woman began to understand the situation better. The boy revealed, in short, hesitant sentences, that he had been living in a foster home for 6 months. He spoke of the director with visible fear in his eyes, describing a stern woman who yelled a lot and made them work on heavy chores. The children slept on thin mattresses on the floor, were cold in the winter, and ate small portions of tasteless food. He said the dog had appeared near the foster home 3 weeks ago, hurt and abandoned. The boy started sharing his food with the animal, hiding pieces of bread and scraps of meat in his clothes to feed it later. The director found out and forbade any contact with the animal, threatening severe punishment for anyone who disobeyed. But the little one continued to care for the dog in secret, going out at night to bring it food and water. The woman felt something tighten in her chest upon hearing that. She herself had grown up in expensive boarding schools, where her parents left her for months while they traveled taking care of business. Expensive gifts arrived regularly, but never a genuine hug or words of true affection. She recognized in that boy's loneliness a distorted reflection of her own empty childhood. She began to investigate the foster home discreetly, making calls and using contacts to obtain information. What she discovered infuriated her. The institution received substantial donations from local businessmen and politicians, but the children lived in miserable conditions. The director bought cheap, low-quality items, pocketing the difference. The reports presented to the inspectors were full of lies, showing a reality that did not exist. The boy slowly adapted to life in the mansion, but lived in constant tension. He woke up screaming every night, sweaty and crying, saying that the director was coming to get him. During the day, he compulsively offered to help with any household chore, cleaning, organizing, trying to be useful. The woman realized with sadness that he believed he needed to earn the right to stay there. The dog recovered under constant veterinary care. The boy spent hours sitting next to the animal, talking softly about things that only the two of them understood. The loyalty between those two wounded beings was absolute and touching. The little boy promised the dog that he would never let anyone hurt it again, that now they were safe together. The woman decided to seek legal help. She hired a lawyer specializing in child law, explaining the situation and her desire to obtain temporary custody of the boy. However, the professional warned about the difficulties of the process. It would be necessary to investigate the foster home officially, prove negligence, and face the slow bureaucracy of the system. During a mandatory visit to the foster home required by social workers, the boy became visibly terrified. He grabbed the woman's hand tightly and refused to let go. The director greeted them with a fake and cold smile, feigning concern while her eyes assessed the visitor's expensive clothes and the luxury car parked out front. The moment the social worker walked away to inspect the facilities, the director approached the boy and whispered something in his ear. The little boy instantly paled, lowering his head and beginning to tremble. The woman demanded to know what had been said, but the director just smiled disdainfully, commenting that ungrateful children needed to learn about consequences. The tension in that cold, dimly lit hallway was suffocating, and the boy squeezed the woman's hand as if his life depended on that contact, while other children watched the scene through the ajar doors of the overcrowded rooms, their empty eyes reflecting a resignation that no child should know. The lawyer began gathering evidence, but soon discovered that the director had political connections in City Hall, influential people who benefited from the embezzlement scheme and who would not allow investigations without resistance. The process would be longer and more complicated than anyone had imagined, but the woman, looking at the boy and the dog sleeping together in her house, knew that she would not give up, regardless of the obstacles that arose along the way. The following weeks brought a routine that the boy had never experienced. He woke up in a soft bed with the dog at his feet and went down to have breakfast at a table where there was real food, not just cold leftovers served grudgingly. The woman watched the little boy eat slowly, savoring each bite as if it were the last, and felt her heart clench every time he asked if he could have seconds, as if he needed permission to satisfy his hunger. The dog was fully recovered now, running around the house with renewed energy. The veterinarian had said that the animal was young, perhaps only a year old, and that the wounds would heal without leaving serious scars. The boy chose a name for the animal. A word he had learned meant true friendship, and repeated it proudly for anyone who would listen. The woman began to notice disturbing details in the little boy's behavior. He never left food on his plate, even when he was clearly full, eating until he felt sick. He kept pieces of bread in his pockets, hiding them under his pillow at night. When questioned gently, he explained naturally that it was necessary to save food for when there was no more, because that always happened. She also noticed that the boy had frequent and specific nightmares. He dreamed that the director entered the room and took the dog away, or that he woke up back in the foster home and discovered that the whole mansion had been just a cruel dream. He would wake up crying, looking for the animal in the dark, and only calmed down when he confirmed that both were still safe in that warm and welcoming place. The lawyer brought discouraging news on a rainy afternoon. During the preliminary investigation, she discovered that there was an aunt of the boy, a distant relative who had never shown interest in the child. This woman lived in another part of the metropolis, worked irregular shifts, and had signed documents years ago, transferring custody to the state. But now, somehow, she had learned of the situation involving the millionaire. The aunt appeared at the mansion 2 weeks later without warning, accompanied by a lawyer with a suspicious appearance. She was a middle-aged woman with worn clothes and a hard expression, who barely looked at her nephew upon entering. Her eyes, however, scanned every room in the house with calculating attention, evaluating paintings, furniture, decorative objects. She asked how much the car in the garage cost, how many bedrooms the house had, whether the woman invested her assets in real estate or in stock market shares. The boy hid behind the woman throughout the visit, clinging to her legs with silent desperation. When the aunt tried to touch him, extending a hand that intended to be affectionate but sounded false, he began to cry convulsively. The dog growled softly, positioning itself protectively between the child and the unwanted visitor. The aunt then revealed her true intentions. She demanded custody of her nephew, claiming blood rights and family ties. Her lawyer began to talk about legal proceedings and priority of blood kinship. The woman felt the world collapse. She had become attached to that boy in a way she had not imagined possible, and the idea of losing him to that clearly self-interested person was unbearable. After they left, the boy was unable to speak for 3 days. He just held the dog, rocking slightly, his eyes fixed on some distant point. The woman tried to talk, offered special food, games, but nothing worked. The little boy had completely shut down, returning to that state of traumatized survival that she thought had been left behind. On the 4th day, late at night, she heard a noise coming from his room. Upon entering, she found the boy crying softly, hugging the dog. He finally spoke, with a broken and scared voice, saying that he didn't want to leave, that he promises to be good, that he can help more with chores, that he won't eat much. The woman sat on the floor next to him and for the first time allowed herself to cry too, explaining that she would fight with all her strength to keep him there. The lawyer worked intensely preparing the defense. She gathered reports from child psychologists who evaluated the boy, documenting his impressive emotional progress in the 3 months since he left the foster home. The changes were remarkable. He had gained weight, slept better, started smiling spontaneously, demonstrated curiosity and a desire to learn. The professionals attested that separating him from that environment would be devastating for his development. Meanwhile, the private investigators hired by the woman continued to document the irregularities at the foster home. They obtained photographs of the precarious facilities, footage of deliveries of low-quality food, and even recordings of conversations where the director openly discussed with suppliers how to maximize profits by cutting essential costs. The embezzled money was substantial, accumulated over years of systematic corruption. The director, upon discovering that she was being investigated, reacted with fury. Anonymous calls began to arrive for the woman, distorted voices making veiled threats. They said that she should worry about her own safety, that rich people had a lot to lose, that it would be better to abandon that insignificant case. But the woman, strengthened by the love she felt for the boy, refused to be intimidated. The boy began attending a private preschool near the mansion. The first days were difficult. He didn't know how to play like the other children, didn't understand the basic social rules, remained isolated in the corner of the playground, watching the others with distrust. The teachers reported that he always asked permission before doing anything, even to go to the bathroom or drink water, but gradually something changed. A girl of the same age, with curly hair and an easy smile, approached him during recess. She offered him half of her snack and asked if he wanted to play hide-and-seek. The boy hesitated for a long time before accepting, but when he finally did, for the first time since the woman had met him, he laughed. A genuine child's laugh, loud and free, that echoed through the playground. The woman received criticism from her high society friends. They didn't understand why she was getting personally involved with that complicated situation. They said it would be simpler to just make a generous donation to the foster home and hire good lawyers to reform the system. One of them commented with false concern that she was risking her reputation and tranquility for a child who wasn't even hers. Those words revealed the superficiality of those relationships, and the woman began to distance herself from that empty social circle. The date of the preliminary hearing was set. The aunt appeared with the same cheap lawyer, wearing slightly better clothes this time, clearly bought to make an impression. The judge was an experienced woman of approximately 60 years, with a penetrating gaze and a reputation for being fair but merciless with lies. The aunt's lawyer argued about blood rights and the importance of the biological family, but when the judge began to ask direct questions, the charade quickly crumbled. The aunt didn't know the name of the boy's dog, didn't know what color he liked, didn't know if he had food allergies, didn't know absolutely anything about the child's life. Her vague and evasive answers made it clear that she had never cared about her nephew before knowing about the fortune involved. The boy was called in to speak privately with the judge. He entered the room trembling, holding tightly to the woman's hand until the last second. The conversation lasted 20 minutes that seemed like an eternity. When they finally came out, the judge had a thoughtful expression and the boy looked exhausted, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The decision wouldn't come immediately, but the lawyer left the hearing optimistic. The evidence of the emotional bond was undeniable, and the aunt's lack of genuine interest was too obvious to be ignored. All that remained was to wait, and the wait for everyone involved would be the most torturous part of that painful process that decided the future of a little boy whose only crime had been wanting to protect an injured dog. The wait for the court decision lasted almost 2 months, and each day seemed longer than the last. The boy developed visible anxiety, asking every morning if today was the day they would know the answer. The woman tried to keep him distracted with activities, trips to the park, playing with the dog, but the tension was present in every moment. During this period, the aunt made one last desperate attempt. She showed up at the boy's school unannounced, trying to convince the staff that she had the right to pick him up. The principal of the school, already informed about the legal situation, refused and immediately called the woman. When she arrived rushing, she found the boy hiding under a table in the front office, crying silently while the aunt shouted outside the locked gate. The woman hugged the little boy tightly, feeling him tremble against her body. He whispered repeatedly that he didn't want to go, that he was very scared, that he would rather run away and live on the street again than go with that strange person. Those words broke her heart, but also strengthened her determination to protect him at any cost. The lawyer obtained a temporary restraining order, preventing the aunt from approaching the boy or the school. The legal document brought some relief, but did not eliminate the constant fear that had settled into their lives. The little boy began to have even more intense nightmares, waking up screaming that they were taking him away from the only home where he had felt safe. At the same time, the investigation into the foster home finally gained official strength. The evidence gathered by the private investigators was delivered to the district attorney, who could no longer ignore the seriousness of the situation. Competent and honest inspectors were assigned to inspect the institution without prior notice, arriving on a cold morning and finding exactly the scenario documented in the photographs. The children slept on thin mattresses scattered on the floor of overcrowded rooms. The food served at breakfast was stale bread and watery milk. There was no adequate heating, and several children were coughing with clear symptoms of untreated colds. The toys were scarce and broken, and the outdoor area was just a cracked concrete patio without any recreational equipment. The director tried to bluff, showing falsified documents and making empty promises of future improvements. But the inspectors were experienced and were not fooled. They confiscated financial records, interviewed frightened employees who finally felt safe to tell the truth, and photographed every corner of that degrading institution. The foster home was temporarily shut down, and the children were transferred to other locations while the investigation proceeded. The boy heard the news and was silent for hours, processing that information. Finally, he asked if the other children would also have dogs and warm houses now. The woman explained gently that they would go to better places, but that each situation was different. The little boy seemed sad, saying that he wished they could all be as lucky as him. That night, the woman made a decision. She spoke at length with her lawyer about the possibility of using part of her fortune to create a social project aimed at vulnerable children. It would not be empty charity, but a real structure that offered psychological support, quality education, and above all, respect and dignity. She had accumulated considerable wealth through the investments she managed, resources that would now find a greater purpose. The court decision finally arrived on a Thursday afternoon. The lawyer called with an emotional voice, barely able to contain her joy when announcing the news. The woman was granted permanent custody of the boy. The judge had been clear in her sentence. The established emotional bond and the child's extraordinary progress were undeniable, while the aunt had never shown genuine interest beyond the financial. The relative was forced to renounce any future rights over the boy. When she told the little boy, he did not show the explosive euphoria she expected. Instead, he was very quiet, processing that information as if he feared it was just another cruel dream. Then slowly, tears began to stream down his face. He hugged the woman and the dog simultaneously and finally allowed himself to believe that this home was really his, that no one could take him away from there, that he was truly safe. The woman immediately began the formal adoption process. She wanted to give the boy not only her home and resources, but also her last name, symbolizing the definitive commitment to be his true mother. The little boy, upon understanding the meaning of that, asked timidly if that meant he could call her Mom. Her response was to hug him so tight that they could both barely breathe. The foster home never reopened. The investigation revealed years of systematic embezzlement of funds, fraudulent contracts with suppliers, and gross negligence in the care of the children. The director faced administrative proceedings that resulted in a permanent ban on working with minors. She would also be held civilly liable for the damages caused, although no amount of money could compensate for the suffering inflicted on those vulnerable children. The boy began to flourish in ways that surprised everyone. He demonstrated vivid intelligence, learning to read with impressive speed, and asking constant questions about how things worked. His drawings, previously only repetitive images of dogs, now showed increasing creativity and complexity. He drew the house, the park, the school, always including the woman himself and the dog as an inseparable unit. At school, he finally integrated completely. The girl with curly hair became his best friend, and together they formed an inseparable duo during recess. The teachers reported that he now actively participated in classes, raised his hand to answer questions, and even helped other children with difficulties. The transformation was so remarkable that the educators commented among themselves about the power of a loving environment in child development. The dog grew strong and healthy, becoming an essential part of the family routine. He slept at the foot of the boy's bed every night, followed the little boy around the house during the day, and ran to meet him every time he came back from school. The bond between them remained deep and special, a constant reminder of where it had all begun, on that cold afternoon when a little boy chose to protect an injured animal, even risking his own safety. The woman, now officially a mother, discovered that unexpected motherhood had filled a void that she didn't even know existed. Her life before seemed so empty despite all the material luxury, so aimless despite all the accumulated wealth. The boy brought renewed meaning to each day, transforming the silent mansion into a home full of life, laughter, and true love. They established their own traditions. Every Sunday they visited the park where the dog ran free while they walked hand in hand. During these walks, they talked about future dreams, and the boy expressed the desire to become a veterinarian when he grew up, to help other abandoned animals like his dog had been. The woman promised to support every step of that journey, regardless of how much time or resources were needed, but not everything was completely resolved. The aunt, furious with the court defeat, spread malicious rumors around the neighborhood about the woman having bought a child. Cruel comments reached the new mother's ears through acquaintances, and she noticed looks of disapproval in some places. That hurt, but not as much as the possibility of losing the boy would have hurt, so she learned to ignore the gossip and focus on what really mattered, the happiness of her newly formed family. The little boy also still carried emotional scars that would not disappear quickly. There were days when he reverted to his old behavior, saving food in his pockets or asking excessive permission for simple things. In those moments, the woman needed infinite patience to gently remind him that he was safe, that there was always enough food, that he no longer needed to live in fear. The following months brought a stability that the boy had never known. The adoption was officially completed in a simple ceremony at the courthouse, where he held tightly to his mother's hand as the judge signed the final documents. Upon leaving there, he had a new last name and a certificate that legally proved what his heart already knew: he had a real family. The social project that the woman had planned began to take concrete form. She bought an old building in a more accessible area of the metropolis and began a complete renovation. The space would be dedicated to offering psychological support, academic tutoring, and recreational activities for children in vulnerable situations. She hired qualified professionals, from psychologists to educators, all committed to making a real difference in the lives of those children. The boy followed the progress of the work with growing interest. He asked to visit the site every week, observing the changes and making surprisingly sensible suggestions for someone so young. He suggested that there should be a special space for dogs and other animals, saying that some children needed friends like his. The mother thought the idea was wonderful and included an area for animal-assisted therapy in the project. At school, the boy continued to progress impressively. His teacher commented during a meeting that he had a special talent for natural sciences, asking complex questions about how animals lived, what they needed to be healthy, and how veterinarians cured their diseases. She suggested enriching his learning with more advanced books and specific activities. The mother bought several books about animals, biology, and veterinary care adapted for children. The boy devoured each page with a thirst for knowledge that delighted everyone. He began to care not only for his own dog, but also for injured birds he found in the garden, trying to help them with the dedication of someone much older. One day, while walking in the park, they found an abandoned pregnant dog, thin and scared. The boy stopped immediately, kneeling down slowly so as not to frighten her. He looked at his mother with pleading eyes, and she already knew what would come, even before he spoke. They took the dog home, and the veterinarian confirmed that she would give birth in a few weeks. The little boy took responsibility for caring for the dog with touching seriousness. He prepared special food, kept fresh water always available, and talked gently to her about how she would be a good mother to her puppies. The woman watched those interactions with a full heart, seeing the boy replicate the care and love that he himself had received. When the puppies were born on a rainy night, the boy stayed awake next to the dog throughout the labor, holding her paw and encouraging her softly. 5 healthy puppies were born, and he cried with joy as he saw them nursing for the first time. The mother realized at that moment that her son had found his true purpose in life. The news of the woman's actions spread through high society, but this time, the reactions were different. Some of her old superficial friends disappeared completely, unable to understand why someone with so much fortune would dedicate time and resources to social causes. However, other people genuinely interested in making a difference began to seek her out, offering financial support and volunteering for the project. A successful businessman who managed investments in international funds contacted her offering to donate part of his annual profits to the project. He explained that he had been raised in an orphanage and understood the importance of giving real opportunities to vulnerable children. The woman accepted the partnership, establishing total transparency about how each amount would be used. The community center finally opened 6 months after the start of construction. The ceremony was simple but moving, with the presence of the first families who would be served. The boy, now 5 years old, cut the ribbon alongside his mother, and his photo appeared in the local newspapers. The headline talked about how a child rescued from the street was now helping other children through the project that his story had inspired. The following weeks were intense. The center received children who needed support every day, and each case deeply touched the hearts of the mother and son. They met girls who were fleeing abusive homes, boys who had lost their parents and had nowhere to go, children with learning difficulties who had never received adequate attention. Each story was unique, but all shared the desperate need for care and hope. The boy insisted on visiting the center every week. He played with the other children, showed them his books about animals, and told his own story in a simplified but powerful way. He said that he had also been very sad before, but that now he had a wonderful mother and a dog who loved him, and that good things could happen when someone really cared. The dog and her puppies brought an unexpected joy to the home. When the puppies were 2 months old, the mother suggested that they find loving homes for them. The boy agreed, but set a condition. He would personally interview each interested family, ensuring that the animals would go to homes where they would be loved and cared for properly. It was surprising to see a 5-year-old child asking serious questions to the interested adults. He questioned them about their routine, available space, experience with dogs, and even asked to visit their homes before approving the adoption. His dedication to ensuring the puppy's well-being impressed everyone who witnessed that process. One day, an unexpected revelation changed everything. During a routine visit to the community center, the mother was approached by a woman of approximately 60 years old who worked as a volunteer at the center. The lady, with tears in her eyes, revealed that she had worked at the old foster home for many years before the director took control. She was fired for refusing to participate in the corruption scheme and had since carried guilt for not having reported everything before. The volunteer recognized the boy immediately. She said that she took care of him when he was a baby, that she rocked him to sleep when he cried, that she fed him with affection. But when the cruel director took over, she was forced to leave and lost contact with all those children she loved so much. Seeing the little boy now, healthy and happy in a loving family, was more than she had dared to dream. The boy listened to that story with intense attention. He had no conscious memories from that time, but something in his heart recognized that kind woman. He asked timidly if she could visit them sometimes, and the lady accepted with overflowing joy. The mother, realizing the importance of that connection, invited the volunteer to become part of their life, creating an extended family built not on blood ties, but on genuine love. The following months brought deep stability and true happiness. The boy turned 6 with a party in the mansion's garden, surrounded by friends from school, children from the community center, and adults who sincerely cared about him. He blew out the candles on the cake, making a wish out loud, without fear or shame, that all the sad children in the world would find their own families and dogs to love. The mother looked around, seeing that scenario that seemed impossible years ago. She, who had always avoided deep emotional bonds after being betrayed in the past, now had a son who taught her daily about courage, compassion, and unconditional love. Her life before seemed empty, focused only on multiplying assets and accumulating wealth without a greater purpose. Now, each day had meaning, each decision considered the well-being of that extraordinary boy. The original dog, now 3 years old, remained loyal and protective. He and the boy continued inseparable, sleeping together, playing together, growing together. That simple animal had been the catalyst for everything, the reason why a woman stopped her car on that cold afternoon, the bridge that connected two lonely souls who desperately needed each other. The story reached the media more broadly when a local news channel decided to cover the work of the community center. During the filming, the boy spoke with impressive maturity about second chances and about how a single act of kindness can change an entire life. His words, simple but profound, touched thousands of people who watched the program. Donations began to arrive from all over the region. Ordinary people, touched by the story, contributed modest but significant amounts. The mother managed everything with absolute transparency, publishing detailed reports about each resource received and each child helped. The project grew beyond her initial expectations, now serving hundreds of children monthly. The boy expressed the desire to study at a public school when he got older, saying that he wanted to better understand the lives of the children that the center served. The mother, although she could easily afford expensive private schools, respected his desire, understanding that his empathy came precisely from having lived through real difficulties. On a quiet spring morning, while they were having coffee together in the garden, the boy asked if the mother regretted stopping the car that afternoon. She held his face in her hands and said that that had been the most important moment of her life, that she wouldn't trade any day by his side for all the wealth in the world, that he saved her as much as she saved him. And so, in that house that was once just an empty mansion full of meaningless luxury, now lived a true family, built on the ruins of suffering transformed into love. The boy who once trembled with cold on the street now slept safe every night. The woman who once lived emotionally isolated despite all her fortune now had a son who gave meaning to each day. And the dog, who was once injured and abandoned, now ran happily through the garden, a living symbol that every being deserves a second chance, and that sometimes the most perfect families are those we choose to build, not those we are born into. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.